Welcome back to the podcast history of our world. Chapter 22, Samuel and Saul. The final act of the Hebrew Hercules, in which Samson brings down the temple of Dagon onto his Philistine captors, did nothing to break their spirits. On the contrary, the entire nation mobilized for war against all the tribes of Israel. The fort town of Aphek would be the site of this battle, and the Philistines had the advantage. Because of their regional dominance, they controlled the iron ore trade. Furthermore, they knew how to use it. The Israelites, meanwhile, were stuck in the Bronze Age. Normally, this wasn't a problem. Having superheroes and legendary warriors on your team is a fair trade-off, but they're all gone. And in the absence of any hint of victory, the Israelite leaders agree that this desperate situation calls for a desperate solution. Time to bring out the Ark of the Covenant. Hey, it worked at Jericho. It'll work here, right? And so it was brought out from its resting place in the tabernacle by the sons of the current judge Eli and paraded up and down the battle lines, Israelite soldiers shouting and cheering. On the Philistine side, there was a good bit of fear and trepidation. They knew about the Ark and Jericho, of the stories how it could shoot forked lightning and carried the very essence of the Israelite God. However, none of this mattered much once they took to the field. At the end of the day, the Israelites had been defeated, and the Philistines had taken possession of the ark, carting it back to their city of Ashdod. This incident is also the origin of our common usage for the word Philistine, someone who is disdainful, indifferent, or downright hostile to art and culture. The citizens of Ashdod rejoiced at the capture of this relic. Aside from the symbolic meaning of taking your foe's treasured possessions, the whole thing was covered in gold. All that merriment stopped as soon as the weird stuff started happening. For starters, everybody in town suddenly came down with a nasty case of hemorrhoids. And to make matters worse, hordes of mice began to infest the other Philistine cities. It was the priests of Dagon who made the connection here and ordered the ark returned back to the Israelites, along with an apology offering of 5 golden mice and 5 golden hemorrhoids. To clarify, that's gold shaped to look like those things, not those things covered in gold. Although then again, gold is still gold. We zoom ahead 20 or so years later to the last judge of the Israelites, Samuel. Like Samson, no razor was ever to touch his head, although he didn't get any super strength out of the deal, just super wisdom. Under his leadership, Samuel led the Israelites in another fight against the Philistines, the Battle of Ebenezer, and was so successful that an uneasy peace was brokered, giving the land a moment of tranquility for the first time in a long time. Maybe it was this relative calm that spurred the elders of Israel to approach Samuel with a radical new idea. Monarchy. Their reasoning essentially boils down to, well, hey, all the other nations have one, why can't we? Samuel chides them for rejecting his wise counsel for some earthly despot. You want to know what a king does? He takes your sons and forces them to fight and die for him. He takes your daughters to be his attendants and servants. He takes your harvest and your livestock, and you'll all be his slaves. And when you come crying to me and the big man, well, we'll just turn our backs on you. To which the elders replied, So does that mean you'll help us? After a little soul-searching, he agrees. Oh, he's probably a little jealous, but it's the will of the people after all. What choice did he have? The line of the judges would be replaced by a king, and Samuel's pick for king number 1 was Saul of the tribe Benjamin. He certainly looks the part after all. Saul is a really big guy, but that's good. You want someone the people will look up to, literally and figuratively. Samuel commenced with the anointing ceremony by pouring a flask of oil on Saul's head, giving him a big smooch and saying these words. Is it not because the Lord that thou shalt rule among the people of Yahweh, and thou shalt save them out of the hands of their enemies? This shall be the sign that he hath anointed thee captain over his inheritance. Basically, the people might want a king, but don't forget where your real power comes from. The man upstairs. And your first test of this power is going to come right now. King Nahash of the Ammonites had marched on the Israelite town of Jabesh Gilead. The townsfolk were farmers, not soldiers, and begged to be taken as servants instead of becoming target practice. Nahash agreed under condition that he be allowed to gouge out the right eye of every one of them. That's also not good. They in turn ask him if they can send messengers throughout Israel to seek help, and for some reason Nahash allows this. Deal being that if no one arrives in 7 days, then prepare for a lifetime of reduced depth perception. Saul catches word about this and is excited for his first chance to flex some royal muscle. He calls for 2 oxen to be sacrificed, and then chops them up into chunks and stringy pieces. These were delivered to the other Israelite tribes along with this message: "Whosoever cometh not forth after Saul and after Samuel, so shall it be done unto his oxen." A simple please could have sufficed, but it works. Saul is able to mobilize a sizable force from this display, and he defeats the Ammonites in a glorious victory. Not bad, but that was just the first course. Upon learning Israel has a king, the Philistines decide to test him, and throughout Saul's early reign, his armies are kept busy skirmishing with their foes, never quite escalating into a full-blown war. Well, until Saul's impatience gets the better of him. He sent his son Jonathan, along with a small commando unit, to sneak into the Philistine garrison at Geba. Once inside, Jonathan assassinates the governor while his men raid the camp, escaping before the enemy even knew they were there. And that's only step 1. In step 2, Saul had envoys sent throughout Canaan, blasting trumpets and loudly proclaiming that this was an awesome victory. Outraged and thoroughly provoked, the Philistines assemble their most powerful army to date. 3,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and a host of infantry, all armed with iron spears and armor. The Israelites, numerous as they are still not properly equipped to fight a large-scale war in the Iron Age, and Saul quickly started to realize this. At his military base, he could see the fear in his men's eyes, and dread began to gnaw at him. Messengers were sent to get Samuel so he could give counsel, but he's nowhere to be seen. And without the holy man's presence, the panic becomes too much, and some soldiers begin to desert. 7 days pass with more troops returning home before Saul can't wait anymore. It's time to appeal to the big man. He offers up a sacrifice to Yahweh looking for a sign, when who should finally arrive but Johnny-come-lately himself, Samuel. He sees Saul doing this and gasps in shock. "What hast thou done?" Saul looked confused and casually mentioned how he's offering prayers because the Philistines were pretty much going to kill everyone, like, tomorrow. Apparently that wasn't the right thing to say, and Samuel fires back that he's made a terrible mistake picking Saul as king. Okay, well, Jonathan wins this battle anyway for his dad, owing to his skilled swordsmanship, keen leadership, and possibly the Philistines' fear of any further proctological blights. Although why does Samuel flip out on Saul? Yeah, it was arrogant to provoke the Philistines, but isn't this just following the original plan? Wipe out everyone in Canaan? Or was Samuel angry that Saul was further usurping his job by acting as a priest? Had Saul gone too far? Evidently, yes. But despite Samuel's cryptic message, Saul looks for an opportunity to redeem himself. He targets the Amalekites, hated enemies of the Israelites since the days when Amalekite raiders harassed Moses and company during the Exodus. Saul marches into their territory and goes on a killing spree, tearing down their settlements, slaughtering all. Back at the camp, Saul finds Samuel to tell him the good news and to reveal a little surprise for him. Not only had he totally wiped out the Amalekites, but he even captured their king alive and took his best sheep and oxen. Wrong answer again. Samuel is furious. Yahweh commands him to take nothing and kill everyone. What part of that is so hard? Saul tries to argue with him that the king is his prisoner, and the sheep and oxen are meant as a sacrifice to Yahweh, but Samuel will have none of it. Hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Saul, stop thinking for yourself and do what you're told. Samuel called for the Amalekite king to be brought to him bound in chains. This king, Agag, had been promised pardon by Saul as one king to another, and he speaks to Samuel. Surely the bitterness of death is past. But Samuel took Saul's sword and grabbed Agag's hair, saying, "As your sword has made women childless, so will your mother be childless among women." Agag is beheaded on the spot. A violent and merciless lesson for how Saul is expected to rule. Now, following this incident, Saul sank into a deep gloom, blamed on evil spirits, of course, and certainly not because he was tearing himself apart trying to understand how to be a good king and obey God's wishes. His depression was accompanied by wild mood swings, where he'd lament his failures one moment and then spout out prophetic ramblings, tearing at his clothes while oblivious to the outside world. Nothing seemed to cure him, and since talking about these feelings wasn't going to happen, Saul found calm in the soothing music of his personal lyre player, a musician from Bethlehem named David. A gifted artist, yes, although unbeknownst to Saul, David had secretly been chosen by Samuel as the new future king of Israel. But that was all hush-hush, and anyway, word arrived that the Philistines are back looking for a rematch. Saul brings the Israelite army to meet the enemy, the two sides stand ready to fight, and from within the Philistine ranks comes forth a giant of a man. At about 9 feet tall, carrying an immense iron spear, supported by a personal shield-bearer, the man known as Goliath proposed a method to end the age-old conflict between their people and avert further bloodshed. The Israelites should choose a champion from their ranks to fight him in single combat. Whichever side loses must submit for good. It's time for a showdown. Saul was the closest in size to Goliath, minus a few feet, but he wasn't about to risk his neck in a clearly unbalanced fight. That's when his musician and personal antidepressant takes the field. David wore simple clothing and was armed with nothing but a staff and a sling. When Goliath saw this, he didn't howl with laughter, but was insulted by this offer. "Am I a dog that thou comest to me with sticks?" Of course, we all know what happens next. David takes his humble sling, winds it up, and sends a small rock hurtling at Goliath with such deadly accuracy and force that it hits him square in the forehead, sending him to the ground in agony. As a side note, slings can launch a bullet 80 to 100 miles an hour. With the giant immobilized, David quickly runs over, grabs Goliath's sword, and hacks off his head. No one expected that to happen, especially not the Philistines, who decide to bolt instead of surrender. The Israelites pursue and cut down their craven foes. Saul embarked on a triumphant parade through the towns of Israel to celebrate his victory, and everywhere he went, the townsfolk ran out with tambourines and drums and sang the newest catchy song. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. While this affront to his royal ego was further compounded once his daughter Michal revealed she had fallen madly in love with David and begged Saul to bless the marriage. His pride still stinging, he agreed, but under one condition. David must bring him the foreskins of 100 Philistines. A pretty nasty but intentional request. Let's face it, David got lucky with Goliath. There's no way someone without military training could accomplish this task. So naturally, you could imagine Saul's disbelief when David returned with not 100, but 200 foreskins. Try not to think about the gross details of that. Well, Saul is honor-bound to grant David his daughter's hand, but no matter. In his head, the decision was already made. David has to disappear for good. David has to die. His son Jonathan refused to take part in this, so Saul invited David to his chambers for his daily music dosage. It's here that David's rocking out to his latest hit, and doesn't notice Saul quietly picking up a hidden spear. The jealous king hurls it at his now son-in-law, and it narrowly misses him. David doesn't give him a chance to explain or reload, and he beelines it out of the palace. He finds a hiding spot while he can figure out what to do next, and eventually Michal and Jonathan find him and help him flee. Although, problem, Saul has declared David an enemy to be slain on sight. That's pretty bad, although being a charismatic rebel has its advantages. Hiding out in the wilderness, he even attracts a loyal force of the roughest, toughest, rootinest, tootinest fighters in all of Canaan. They called themselves the Mighty Men. Oh, there was Josheb-Bashebath, who slew 800 with just a spear. Eleazar, who fought so long with the Philistines in battle that his hand fused with his sword handle. Shammah, who stood alone to fight off the enemy in a field of lentils to buy the others time to escape. And last and greatest of all was David's right-hand man, his nephew Joab, loyal and strong. This band of merry men, mighty men, protected David from the agents of Saul and fought the Philistines in a tireless battle for Canaan. Except when they were fighting for the Philistines as mercenaries. That also happened. Hey, good intentions ain't gonna put food on the table. Well, in his failed search to find David, Saul's melancholy had taken a dangerous and vile turn. His obsession made him commit great acts of evil against his people and his God. He betrayed the Gibeonites, whom Joshua swore to protect, and after learning that a group of priests had harbored David but refused to reveal his current whereabouts, Saul had them slaughtered, and then had everyone in the town that the priests lived in slaughtered. Saul's rampage probably would have gotten worse if a massive Philistine force hadn't moved in to attack, and he was in no mind to lead. Saul was consumed with paranoia over rumors David was leading the Philistines, and then beside himself with grief that Samuel was no longer alive to give him counsel. Although that last problem can be fixed. Saul snuck out of his military headquarters to enlist a female necromancer, one who can communicate with the dead. She was able to summon Samuel's spirit, which immediately started insulting Saul. The sad king tried to seek encouragement and advice from his former mentor, but ultimately just really wanted to know why God had abandoned him. Samuel was unmoved. You ask me why God has abandoned you? Because you chose not to obey his commands. You did not execute his judgment against the Amalekites, and therefore he has taken your kingdom away. Tomorrow Yahweh will deliver Israel unto the hand of the Philistines. Tomorrow came, and the Israelites are defeated. Saul and his son Jonathan slain in battle. Saul's paranoia wasn't unfounded. David and his men were actually fighting for the Philistines at this point, but were kept out of this battle as their commander was concerned about their loyalty. David receives the news of Saul's death by a messenger, whom he promptly stabs to death. Remember, it's an emotional time. David never actually wanted Saul dead, just for the guy to be at peace with him. Well, too late now, and being Israel's most wanted criminal or not, he needs to pay his respects. David arrives at the city of Hebron in Judah, although, hang on, those aren't soldiers grabbing him, but people, the whole city actually, which raise him up and loudly proclaim him the new king of Israel. Hey, alright, King David's time to shine. Saul who? Wait a second though. Judah is but one tribe. They occupy a large territory and are supported by the tiny land of the Benjaminites, but there's 10 other tribes which make up the northern state of Israel, and they've decided that Saul's other son, Ishbaal, is king. Neither side backs down, and a bloody 2-year-long civil war begins. The northern tribes are good fighters, but Judah had always excelled at warfare, dating back to the days of Joshua. Led by Joab, the supporters of David inflict decisive victories against their kinsmen, but war rages on, brother fighting against brother. That is until 2 actual brothers come up with a solution. Rechab and Baanah were captains in Ishbaal's army and offered to stand guard while their king slept. They end the civil war crisis by stabbing him in the gut and chopping off his head. After finding their way to David's headquarters in Hebron, they present him with the head of Ishbaal, eagerly awaiting their reward. David speaks first. When someone told me Saul was dead, I took hold of him and slew him on the spot. So what more should I do when I hear that wicked men have slain a righteous person in his own bed? Shall I not require your blood for his and smite you from the earth? Whoops! The 2 assassins are executed and their hands and feet sliced off to hang over a pool. For some reason, David doesn't return the head of Ishbaal, but buries it in a sepulcher. Well, it's not like he can reattach it or anything, right? So at the age of 30, David becomes king of a reunified Israel. But no one ever said ruling is easy. Would David be a kind and virtuous man and obey both the people and scripture? Or would the sins and temptations of the throne be too much to handle? Find out next time as we explore his reign on the podcast History of Our World. For more information about the music of the ancient Hebrews featured in this episode, visit ancientlyre.com. My sincere thanks to Michael Levy for allowing his authentic music to be featured today. You can support his efforts to bring the sounds of the ancient world to modern audiences by purchasing his albums on iTunes, Amazon, or Bandcamp.